SonicLAB
TV.
We're going to take a look at the Focusrite Saffire Pro 24 audio interface. This is a FireWire interface and it fits somewhere between the Saffire Original and the Saffire Pro 40. All of the Saffire range has a different number of I/O configurations. The Saffire Pro 24 features 4 analog inputs, 6 analog outputs, 8 ADAT inputs, or 4 if you're running at 96K, an SP-Diff I/O, and also MIDI I/O. Pro 24 is a 1U high half rack format. The front panel combi connectors take XLR or 1/4-inch jack and 48-volt switchable phantom power. Each of these channels has an independent gain control, and there's a 4-channel 5-segment LED for showing the analog input levels. There's a dedicated monitor knob and a separate headphone level output and jack. Flipping the unit round, we've got balanced 1/4-inch jacks for line inputs 3 and 4 and also analog outputs 1 to 6. The optical input can either be SP-Diff or ADAT. Incidentally, ADAT can be configured to be 8 channels at 44.1 or 48K and 4 channels at 96K using the SMUX standard. There's a single FireWire port only, unfortunately, so you can't put this as part of a FireWire chain through unless it's right at the end. MIDI I/O, and the power is handled by this 12-volt DC in, although you can bus power the unit over FireWire. Finally, dedicated SP-Diff I/O. In the Saffire Pro 24 box, you get the Saffire unit itself, a FireWire 400 lead. It would have been nice to maybe see a 400 to 800 adapter included so that we could use it straight out of the box with our MacBook Pros or anything else that has FireWire 800. Standard 12-volt power supply, but this is slightly different in the fact that it's got one of these interchangeable plug faces, so you can use it anywhere in the world. Software drivers and setup, including the control panel, the DSP mixing stuff. There's also the Focusrite Novation Excite Plus pack, which features a whole bunch of bundled software and samples, which we'll go into later. You are going to need to install the software to get the Saffire Pro 24 working with your system, but it's compatible with Windows XP, Windows Vista, Mac OS X 10.4.11 and above. Incidentally, even though you do get the CD driver in the box with most of these things, it's always worth checking out the manufacturer's website and downloading the latest one, because quite often when they ship these things, there's a few tweaks that have gone on in between it arriving at the shop and leaving the factory. Okay, now I've installed the driver. I just go into my software of choice. In this case, this is Ableton Live 8, and select the Saffire 16 in, 8 out. I can set up the input and the output configuration to access all of the inputs and outputs. Incidentally, what you're listening to here is a dynamic microphone, which is the Rode Procaster, going into the Focusrite mic channel, and I've got I've got full gain on this, and I'm not hearing any noise. And this is quite a testament to the award-winning Focusrite mic outs, because usually on this microphone I do introduce a certain amount of noise, and say with the Mackie VRZ3 you can certainly hear noise, but I can't hear any on this. I've now plugged in a condenser microphone and paired this up again into input channel 1. I've enabled the 48-volt phantom power, and I've backed the gain off to around 7.5, 7.75. I'm hearing lots of nice high, crisp highs, and sort of capturing all the quality of this rather nice condenser microphone, and I haven't had to put nearly so much gain into the system. The setup of the Saffire Pro 24 is taken care of with the Saffire MixControl software panel. This, as well as the actual basic setup of the unit, this allows you access to some quite complex mixing and routing facilities, which give you up to 6 independent monitor mixes for use in a variety of situations. So here is the Saffire MixControl software. In this area here is where you've got the basic setup of the unit. You can set the sample rate here, 44.1, 48, 882 and 96 kilohertz. You can synchronize it to internal clock, SP-Diff or ADAT. Additional settings here allow you to use the ADAT as optical and the SP-Diff as AC3 mode. AC3 mode is digitally encoded 5.1 surround sound that might come from your DVD player. And then you can set FireWire driver latency to be short, medium, long or very long, depending on the power of your own system. You can also set the input sensitivity of the 4 line inputs. The first 2 can be switched between line and instrument, which will give you the LEDs on the front panel. Line inputs 3 and 4 can be switched between high and low gain, which is particularly handy if you're working -10 or +4. Across the top here, you've got the tabs for setting up the various different mixes. You get metering on each of the inputs. Right here, you can see the mic input that I'm using, and out here, you can see the mix output level. You've got PFL, mute and solo, and you can label each of the channels as you see fit. Each of these faders allows you to set the input source to be from a physical input or from a return from your DAW. So you can set up quite complex mixes. The routing section here is where you can set some pretty complex input and output mappings, and also what you're feeding your headphone output. Incidentally, the headphone output is good and loud. This is something that's often lacking in these standalone audio interfaces, but there's plenty of gain in this system. You can route any input, be it analog or digital, or any DAW return, or any of the mixes to any of the outputs. Now here's the thought. It'd be nice to be able to actually MIDI map controllers into Saffire MixControl, so you would have hardware control over the overall volume, the dim, the mute, and perhaps even down to the mix output levels and mix input levels. Perhaps this is something that Focusrite could see doing in a future software update. This loopback section here allows me to essentially capture system audio or audio that's coming from another application and route it back into my DAW, providing essentially another couple of inputs. So I've got DAW 1 and 2 listed here, which are essentially my system audio outputs. If I flip to my web browser and hit play, worth a special mention. The audio is routed back into loopback 1 and 2. Then if I go to my Logic input channel, I select loop 1 and 2 as my inputs, go into record ready, and here is my signal. I can then just record the audio directly into my DAW. The flexibility afforded you by the MixControl panel is dazzling. The number of I/O routings and mix setups is pretty incredible. In fact, in some instances, a little bit over daunting. Sometimes you find yourself scratching your head trying to figure out how on earth you're going to set it up to be the way you want. But you can save the presets so you can recall them for further use. It's not going to replace your mixing desk anytime soon, though, not totally, because what you can't do is group sets of inputs together and bus them to, if you like, a virtual DAW input. And that's something that you can only do, as far as I can tell, with a dedicated mixing desk. So let's take a look and see what you also get on the Excite Plus DVD. There's an install of Ableton Live Lite 7 with an upgrade path, no doubt. There's a bass station virtual instrument, which is a model of the Novation Classic Monosynth. You also get the MTD mic, the drummer loops. Fairly ambient, but there's a whole bunch of these by Mike Reed, and these come as Rex loops, WAV hits and WAV loops, and also there's an Ableton Impulse kit for that. You also get a Loopmasters sample library, and there's a whole bunch of different loops and what have you in here. Let's have a look, just pick a few at random. All provided by loopmasters.com. This lot should certainly keep you going if you haven't got any DAW software and you just install Ableton Live Lite. There's a whole bunch of loops and samples in there to get the juices going, and maybe you'll create some hits out of them. In the time that I've had the Saffire Pro 24, I haven't had any problems. The drivers seem to be rock solid. The only problems I did have really were trying to set up fairly complex mixing and monitoring things. Perhaps, for instance, when I was trying to do the podcast without a mixing desk. In the end, to be honest, it was just easier to go back to using the mixing desk, and I knew it would work. The only other real downside I can see is the fact that it's FireWire 400. There aren't a lot of computers with that as standard, but you can get adapter leads from 800 to 400, and if you've got a MacBook Pro with a PCI Express card, you can always stick one of these in it, which I successfully did on my MacBook Pro, and it worked fine. Pricing, I think it's actually quite a good deal. In the UK, it's £249, and in the US, it's $399. I have seen it for considerably cheaper in dollars, so if you shop around, you should get a bit of a bargain.